Hi, I'm Rowena. Do you know what it feels like to beg your own mother for a bowl of soup while burning up with pneumonia, only to hear, "I can't, I'm packing for our Maui trip"? Hours later, feverish on my couch, I saw $5,000 drained from my credit card. 5 business class tickets, all of them flying away. None for me. I locked the account. I thought that was the end of it. But then there was a pounding at my door, and my father's voice saying, "Open up, we need to talk." Before we dive in, tell me, what time are you listening to this, and where are you? Drop a comment below. I read every one. The cough rattled my chest so hard it made my vision blur. My little apartment felt colder than usual, though I knew it was just me, the fever creeping higher, making the walls seem to breathe. I sat on the edge of my bed, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of hospital detergent, staring at the phone in my hand. I hadn't wanted to call her. I really hadn't. But the truth was, I couldn't stand on my own long enough to make a decent meal, and all I wanted was a bowl of soup. Something warm. Something that reminded me I wasn't completely alone in the world. "Mom," I croaked when she answered, my voice barely more than a whisper. "Oh, Rowena, you sound awful," she said, her tone more annoyed than concerned. I could picture her perfectly manicured, walking around the house while balancing the phone between her shoulder and ear. "You need to take better care of yourself. You know you can't afford to get sick with that job of yours." "I know," I whispered, pressing my forehead into my hand. "I was wondering if maybe you could bring me some soup? Just for tonight, My throat tightened, partly from the pneumonia, partly from the lump forming there. "I can't really get out." There was a pause, long enough to make me think maybe she'd say yes. Instead, she let out a little laugh, airy and dismissive. "Oh, sweetheart, I wish I could, but I'm busy packing for Maui. We leave tomorrow morning. You know how stressful it is to get everyone organized for a trip." "Maui?" The word tasted bitter on my tongue. "Yes, your father, Sabine, and Andrew are all coming. We deserve a little break after this year, don't we? Anyway, just order takeout or something. DoorDash is a blessing." And then, without even a goodbye, "I'll talk to you later, okay? Feel better." Click. I sat there staring at the phone, my hand trembling. Busy packing for Maui. I couldn't even afford to get my car serviced last month, and she was worried about packing swimsuits for a vacation. I looked toward my kitchen, at the freezer filled with discount microwave dinners I'd bought on sale last week, and felt something hollow open up in me. By evening, my fever made every movement slow. I shuffled to the kitchen, peeled back the plastic on a sad-looking frozen meal, and put it in the microwave. The hum filled the room, but it didn't make me feel any less alone. I sat at the counter, scrolling through my phone to distract myself from how weak I felt. That's when I saw it. The notification from my credit card app. A $5,000 charge. My heart pounded as I opened it. 5 business class tickets. I didn't need to read further to know whose names were on them. Sabine, Andrew, Mom, Dad. Probably a +1 for some friend of theirs, but not me. Never me. I blinked at the screen, my fingers going numb. They'd used my card. My card. And they hadn't even bothered to ask. I thought about the bills I'd covered for Dad's emergencies, the rent I'd paid for Sabine when she fell on hard times, the endless little ways I'd been the quiet safety net. And now, here I was, alone, sick, eating frozen dinners while they booked luxury seats to paradise. My phone buzzed again. A text from Mom. "Hey, don't freak out when you see the charge. We'll sort it out later. It was just easier to use your card, since you have the miles." A winky face. A damn winky face. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Instead, I stared at that text until my vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I should let it go. That's what I always did, wasn't it? Just swallowed it down and told myself it wasn't worth the fight. But something in me snapped. Maybe it was the fever. Maybe it was the way she said, "Don't freak out," like I was some child having a tantrum. Or maybe it was just the years of carrying their weight on my back finally crushing me. I opened my banking app with shaking fingers, locked the card, and disputed the charge. It took less than 5 minutes, but my hands felt steady for the first time all day. I set the phone down and whispered into the empty room, "Not this time." A sudden pounding on my front door made me jump, my breath catching in my throat. It was nearly 10 p.m. Who could that be? The knocking came again, harder this time, rattling the thin door frame. "Rowena, open the door. We need to talk." It was my father's voice. The pounding didn't stop. My heart thudded in my ears, louder than the rain outside. I stayed frozen in place for a moment, clutching the blanket tighter around my shoulders. I wanted to ignore him, let him stand out there in the wet cold, but that voice, my father's voice, had the weight of a lifetime behind it. It was the same tone that used to call me out of bed as a kid when I didn't move fast enough, the same tone that silenced me at dinner tables when I dared to disagree. I walked slowly to the door, each step making my lungs ache. I didn't undo the chain. I only cracked it open. The hallway light flickered, casting shadows across his face. Gareth stood there in his heavy coat, hair damp from the rain, his jaw tight like he'd been practicing this look of disappointment on the way over. "You're really going to make me stand out here?" he said, his voice low and sharp. "It's almost midnight," I replied, my own voice hoarse, shaking more from fever than fear. "Why are you here?" He leaned closer to the doorframe. "You know why. The airline called. Those tickets were declined. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? Your mother and I were standing there like fools. Sabine had to watch them tear up our itinerary." I blinked at him, struggling to keep my voice steady. "You mean the tickets you charged to my card without asking? The ones I didn't agree to pay for?" He scoffed, as if I'd said something absurd. "Oh, come on, Rowena. You've always covered things like this. Why start acting brand new? We needed the points, and you know you always help." "I always help because you guilt me into it," I said, my fingers tightening on the edge of the door. "This time, you didn't even bother to tell me. That's theft, Dad." He bristled, standing taller. "Watch your mouth. Family doesn't throw words like that around. Family doesn't slam doors on family." Family. Always that word, like it was supposed to mean unquestioning loyalty, like it erased boundaries. I felt my anger start to push through the fever haze. "You didn't think it was slamming a door on me when you decided I wasn't worth inviting on that trip?" I shot back. "You wanted my card, but not me." Before he could respond, his phone rang. He swiped the screen and held it up. "It's your mother," he said, then tapped the speaker button. "Rowena?" Claudette's voice oozed through, sweet and sharp all at once. "Honey, why are you doing this? You've always been our rock. Don't ruin this over a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I coughed, trying to keep from laughing. "You took $5,000 from me. Without asking. That's not a misunderstanding." "Oh, sweetheart," she said, using that condescending lilt I'd known all my life. "You've always been so generous. This isn't like you. What's gotten into you?" I swallowed hard. I was too sick to keep up the usual dance, too tired to pretend their words didn't cut deep. What's gotten into me? Maybe I'm finally tired of being treated like an ATM? Maybe I want to be more than the person you call when you need money. There was silence for a beat, and I could picture her pursing her lips on the other end, disappointed that I'd dared to speak to her like an equal. Gareth stepped forward, his hand brushing against the chain as if he might rip it off. "Open this door. We're not leaving until this is fixed." I felt my chest tighten, not just from the pneumonia, but from years of swallowing my anger until it curdled inside me. I took a breath that hurt going in and said, calm and clear. "Get off my porch. I'm not your safety net anymore." He stared at me like I'd spoken another language. Then, with a frustrated shake of his head, he muttered something under his breath and turned toward the stairs. His shoes squeaked on the wet hallway floor as he left. The door clicked shut, and I leaned against it, shaking. My phone buzzed in my hand. A text from Sabine. "You're being selfish. You'll regret this." Regret? My thumb hovered over the screen as I stared at her words. Regret, or finally being free. I set the phone down on the kitchen table and just stared at it for a while. Sabine's text still flashing in my mind like a neon sign. "You're being selfish. You'll regret this." The words rolled around in my head as if they were looking for a place to stick. Regret. Selfish. Two words my family loved to throw at me, dressed up like morality when really they were weapons. 2 days had passed since Gareth came pounding at my door. I hadn't answered a single call. The sound of my phone buzzing now felt like a physical ache. I'd muted it, left it face down, and let the silence grow. But ignoring them didn't erase the weight pressing down on me. I spent most of those 2 days moving between the couch and the kitchen, wrapped in an old quilt, letting daytime TV play in the background. The fever had broken, but the exhaustion clung to me like a second skin. By the second afternoon, a gray, overcast light creeping through my blinds, I knew I couldn't just sit here feeling sorry for myself. I needed answers, about all of it. I pulled the box of old bank statements out from under the desk. It was heavier than I remembered, stuffed with years of receipts, canceled checks, and forgotten promises. I'd kept everything, partly because I was organized, partly because some small part of me had always known I might need to defend myself one day. As I flipped through the first pile, the numbers started to blur. Medical bills, home repairs, emergencies. I saw the $3,000 I paid for Dad's deductible when he refused to get care unless I helped. I saw the $12,000 wire transfer for what I'd been told was a kitchen remodel, but had actually gone to wipe out Derek's credit card debt after one of his bad bets. Derek, my brother-in-law, Sabine's husband. He had a way of convincing everyone that his screw-ups were just bumps in the road, that things were about to turn around. And Sabine, she didn't just believe him, she defended him like it was her calling. I remembered sitting in their living room while Derek went on about investing opportunities that sounded more like gambling dressed up in nicer clothes. I'd written the check anyway, because that's what I did. I kept flipping through the pages, each one like a breadcrumb, leading me back through years of being used. I found receipts for Sabine's emergency rent the month she and Derek had decided a vacation in Cancun was more important than paying their landlord. I found payments for Mom's unexpected medical expenses that turned out to be cosmetic work she wanted before a church fundraiser. It was like watching my entire adulthood laid out in ink, every instance of me saying yes when I wanted to say no. Every time I believed them when they swore, "We'll pay you back." I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. Memories flooded in uninvited. The night I'd driven to the ER with a 102-degree fever last year, calling Mom from the parking lot because I was too weak to walk in alone. She hadn't answered, then later texted me, "Sabine's kids have a recital tonight. Can it wait until tomorrow?" Even then, I'd excused it. Told myself she didn't mean it. But looking at these statements now, I realized that night hadn't been an exception. It had been the rule. A sharp beep pulled me out of my thoughts. A new voicemail. I hesitated before playing it, but curiosity got the better of me. Sabine's voice came through, sickly sweet with just enough bite underneath. "Rowena, you need to stop this. You don't even have a family of your own. What else do you need your money for? We're all trying to live good lives here, and you're making it harder than it has to be." I froze. I knew she was entitled, but hearing it said out loud like that, it was like she'd just summarized how they all saw me, not as a person, not as their sister or daughter, just as a resource. My throat felt tight, but there was no sadness left in it, just a kind of burning clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a one-time slip. It was a pattern, a system they'd built where my worth was measured by what I could give them and how quietly I'd do it. I put the phone down and stared at the stacks of papers covering my table. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel numb. I felt angry. And it was steady, grounding. My phone lit up again. A new text. This time from Derek. We need to talk. You're making things worse for everyone. I let out a long breath, shaking my head. Worse for who? I muttered to myself. For me, or for the ones who've been living off me. I stood at the kitchen sink, staring at the small mountain of unopened envelopes I'd shoved to the side. Bills, statements, flyers, they all felt like they belonged to another life. I'd been turning over Derek's text in my head since last night, wondering whether to answer or block his number altogether. But before I could decide, a loud, persistent knock rattled my door. It wasn't the nervous, hesitant knock of someone asking for permission. It was ownership, like they had every right to demand my attention. I tightened my robe, dragged myself to the door, and peered through the peephole. Sabine. And of course Derek was with her, shifting his weight impatiently, wearing that smug look that always made my skin crawl. I didn't open the door right away. I thought about pretending I wasn't home, but Sabine leaned in toward the door and said loudly, "Rowena, we're not leaving. So unless you want the neighbors wondering why your sister's knocking like a crazy person, open up." With a resigned breath, I cracked the door, leaving the chain on. "This isn't a good time," Sabine gave a pitying laugh. "It never is with you, is it? We just want to clear up this little misunderstanding." I unlocked the chain, but only because I knew she wouldn't leave otherwise. They brushed past me as if I'd invited them, Derek already scanning the room like he owned it. Sabine plopped herself on my couch and crossed her legs, exhaling dramatically. "You really put Mom through the ringer, you know. She was humiliated when the tickets didn't go through. Do you want her crying at the airport in front of her friends? Is that what you wanted?" Her words dripped with manipulation, and for a moment I just let them hang there. "Sabine," I said slowly, "you took my card and charged $5,000 without asking me. That's not a misunderstanding. That's theft." Derek, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, snorted. "The tickets are non-refundable. You can't just pull the plug like that and expect no fallout." "Non-refundable?" I shot back, narrowing my eyes. "Business class tickets are refundable, unless—" I stopped when I saw Derek glance nervously at Sabine. She glared at him, but it was too late. He blurted out, "Unless part of that charge wasn't for the tickets." Sabine turned on him like a hawk. "Derek." But my focus sharpened on him. What part of it wasn't for the tickets? He tried to recover, but the damage was done. "It's complicated. I had some obligations. I needed to square away a few things so the trip could even happen." It hit me all at once. My jaw clenched, my hands gripping the edge of the kitchen counter. "You used my money to pay off your gambling debts." Derek looked at the floor. Sabine jumped in, her voice sweet and cutting. "Oh, come on, Rowena. Don't be dramatic. We had to fix things. You wouldn't understand because you don't have those kinds of responsibilities. You don't even have a family of your own. You should be grateful we need you. Otherwise, what purpose would you have?" I felt something in me snap, not in the loud, explosive way they probably expected, but in the quiet, steady way that changes everything. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You used me to hide your failures. That's not family. That's theft. And don't you dare tell me I should be grateful for being exploited. Sabine's face twisted, but I didn't give her time to speak. You came here thinking I'd roll over like always, but those days are done. Derek muttered something under his breath, but I ignored him. I opened the door wide and gestured toward it. Get out. Sabine stood, her face a storm. At the doorway, she spun back, her voice low and venomous. If you go public with this, you'll regret it more than we will. I met her glare without flinching. Then I guess it's time I stop keeping your secrets. She slammed the door on her way out. For a long moment, I stood there in the quiet, listening to the echo of their departure. My hands were trembling, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel powerless. I felt awake. When I shut that door behind Sabine and Derek, I told myself I was done. Done playing the good daughter, the peacemaker, the one who swallowed everything just to keep the family machine moving. But the silence that followed felt like a weight pressing down on my chest. 2 nights later, I was still carrying it. The rain had been steady all evening, a soft percussion against the windows, but it didn't bring peace. My apartment looked like my mind, messy, neglected, cluttered with reminders of everything I was trying to avoid. Unpaid bills sat in a sloppy pile on the kitchen table next to a cluster of half-empty prescription bottles. My dinner from last night was still on the counter, untouched. I told myself I'd clean it up, later, but later kept never coming. Instead, I found myself lying on the couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady hum of the fridge. Every sound felt too loud, like my apartment was conspiring to remind me of everything I couldn't fix. Then my phone buzzed, a voicemail. From Mom. I knew I shouldn't listen, but my thumb hovered over the play button anyway. Her voice came through like it always did, syrupy, sweet, laced with judgment. Rowena, she began, drawing out my name like she was tasting it. Your father hasn't eaten since you embarrassed him. Do you realize what you've done to this family? After everything we've done for you? We've always been there for you, sweetheart. Always. And this is how you repay us? I don't even recognize you anymore. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles ached. I'd heard it all before, every variation of it, but it still hit like a gut punch. I could picture Dad at the table, not because he was too upset to eat, but because he knew Mom would tell me about it, weaponize it, make me feel like I had to fix him. I replayed it. Once, twice, 4 times. Each time it dug deeper. And then the guilt came, wrapping around me like a familiar blanket. Maybe I had been too harsh. Maybe locking the account was petty. Maybe I should just give them the money, let them have their trip, keep the peace. That's how it always went, didn't it? They hurt me. I caved. We pretended everything was fine. Silence had always felt safer than fighting. I sat up, my head in my hands, and whispered to the empty room, maybe I should just let them have it all. And for a moment, I believed it. My eyes fell on a shoebox I'd shoved under the coffee table months ago. Receipts, cards, random keepsakes, junk I hadn't had the courage to sort through. On autopilot, I pulled it out, sifting through its contents, until my fingers stopped on a photo. Sabine's wedding. I was in the back row of the picture, half cut off by the frame. I remembered that day with painful clarity, how I'd quietly paid part of the venue deposit because Mom said they were a little short, and how Sabine never thanked me. She'd sat me at the farthest table from the dance floor like an afterthought, like I didn't belong in my own sister's celebration. I stared at that photo for what felt like hours. It hit me harder than Mom's voicemail, harder than Derek's confession. I'd been invisible for so long that I'd started to believe it was my role. to give without acknowledgement, to stay silent so they could shine. But staring at that version of me, in that awful pastel dress, smiling like I was happy to be overlooked, I couldn't unsee it. My silence hadn't brought peace. It had just kept me erased. I leaned back against the couch, tears streaming down my face. But there was no collapse this time, no numbness, just a strange, simmering clarity. My phone buzzed again, yanking me from the memory. A text from an unknown number. I know what they did. We need to talk. M. I wiped my face, my heart pounding as I read it over and over. "Who are you?" I whispered to the empty room. "And what do you know?" And the text kept replaying in my mind all night. "I know what they did. We need to talk. M." I didn't respond right away. I sat with it, wondering if this was some twisted trap, another manipulation, another way for them to pull me back in. But something about it felt different, sharp, direct, almost urgent. By mid-morning, I couldn't stand the suspense anymore. I replied, asking who they were and what they wanted. The response was quick. "Meet me at the corner grind, downtown, 2 p.m. You'll want to hear this." So here I was, 2 hours later, sitting at a small corner table in a coffee shop I hadn't been to in years. The place was quiet, the kind of spot people chose when they didn't want to be overheard. My stomach was twisted into knots, my hands wrapped around a lukewarm latte I hadn't even sipped. Then she walked in, Marissa. I didn't know her well, only by name and the occasional story Sabine told in her snide, superior way. Derek's ex-wife. She was taller than I expected, dressed neatly, her hair pulled back, eyes sharp but calm. She spotted me instantly and approached without hesitation. "Rowena?" she asked, her tone polite but measured. I nodded. "Marissa." She slid into the chair across from me and set her bag down with a quiet thud. "Thanks for meeting me. I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," I admitted, my voice low. "How do you even know me?" Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I know more than you think, and I know what they've been doing to you." I froze, staring at her. "What exactly do you think you know?" Marissa didn't waste time. She pulled out a small folder from her bag and set it on the table between us. "This isn't a guess. It's proof." I hesitated before reaching for it. Inside were printed bank statements, email screenshots, and even a few transaction histories I immediately recognized. My accounts. My heart thudded in my chest as I skimmed through them. There it was in black and white, transfers from my credit card to accounts tied to Derek, all masked under family expenses. I looked up at her, my throat dry. How do you even have this?" Her gaze softened slightly. "After my divorce, I kept tabs on Derek's financial moves. He has a pattern, Rowena, gambling, debt, dragging people into his mess. He did it to me, and now he's doing it to you. Claudette's helping him. And Gareth? He knows. He always knows." The words settled like stones in my chest. I'd suspected they were using me, but this was deliberate, calculated. Marissa leaned forward. "Claudette begged me not to tell you, said it would tear the family apart, that it was better if you didn't know, but you deserve to know the truth." I felt my hands trembling as I set the papers down. "So this wasn't just about the Maui tickets?" She shook her head. "No. That was just the tip of it. They've been funneling money through you for months. Maybe longer." My mind reeled. All those emergencies, the vague explanations, the missing funds I told myself I must have misplaced. They weren't accidents. They weren't oversights. They were lies. Marissa must have seen the color drain from my face, because she added quietly, "They won't stop, Rowena. They'll keep draining you until there's nothing left, unless you make it public, unless you fight back." I sat back, staring at her. There it was, the thing I'd been avoiding, the thing that terrified me. Making it public meant losing whatever flimsy connection I still had to my family. It meant war. But as I glanced back at the papers, the anger settled in. This wasn't family. This was exploitation dressed up as loyalty. Marissa reached into her bag one last time and slid a flash drive across the table. "You'll need this when you decide how far you're willing to go." "It's all there. Emails, records, everything." I stared at it for a long moment before picking it up, feeling its weight in my hand. If they want a war, I thought, my pulse steadying, they'll finally see what I've been holding back. And by the time I got home, the city had gone quiet. The rain that had been falling all day finally stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the dim glow of the street lamps. My apartment felt different tonight, not like a refuge, but like the war room it was about to become. I set the flash drive Marissa had given me on the table and stared at it for a long time. It was so small, barely the size of my thumb, yet it felt heavier than anything I'd ever held. Proof. That's what she called it, and proof changes everything. I changed into an old sweatshirt, tied my hair back, and made tea I didn't plan to drink. The motions kept me steady, kept me from crumbling. For once, I wasn't pacing or crying or replaying their words in my head. I felt, still, controlled. I opened my laptop and started a new folder. For legal. It felt official, almost ceremonial. I copied everything from the flash drive, then added my own: bank statements, receipts, emails, screenshots. Years of helping out, years of theft disguised as family needs. Each file felt like a piece of the cage I'd been living in, now turned into evidence. Marissa had texted earlier. "Document everything, timestamp it, make sure there's no room for them to deny it." So I did. Every charge, every unexplained withdrawal, every loan that had magically vanished. As I worked, I thought about how silence used to feel like safety. Keeping my head down, staying out of fights, that was survival. I learned early that speaking up only brought more pain. But now, sitting here building my case, I saw it for what it really was: surrender. When I'd finished sorting the files, I picked up my phone and dialed the fraud department at my bank. My voice didn't shake. I calmly explained the unauthorized charges, flagged the accounts tied to Derek and Claudette, and walked through the process step by step. The woman on the line asked if I wanted to press charges. For the first time, I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I said. "I do." After I hung up, I stared at my phone for a while, then scrolled back to Marissa's last message. She had sent me the number of a lawyer she trusted. My thumb hovered over the screen. It felt like crossing a line you can't uncross. But hadn't they already crossed every line with me? I pressed the call button. The lawyer, his name was Jordan, listened quietly as I explained everything. When I finished, there was a pause before he said, "You know, they think you're weak. That's why they've gotten away with this for so long. But that's also your greatest advantage right now. They'll never see you coming." His words lodged themselves somewhere deep inside me. They thought I was weak, and I had let them think that. But maybe that could work in my favor. By the time I hung up, my plan was starting to take shape. I wasn't going to warn them. I wasn't going to plead or negotiate or give them another chance to twist the story. The element of surprise would be my weapon. I opened my family group chat, one I'd been silent in for weeks, and typed a single sentence: "We need to talk. Tomorrow. All of you." I didn't wait for replies. I didn't want to read the excuses or the guilt trips that would come flooding in. I shut my laptop and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Let's see how they act, I whispered to the empty room. When I stopped playing my part. By the time I pulled into my parents' driveway, the sun had already dipped low, leaving the sky an unsettling shade of gray. Their house loomed like it always did, big, polished, the kind of home meant to impress neighbors. I sat in the car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, feeling the quiet hum of anticipation settle into my chest. Tonight wasn't about shouting or crying. Tonight was about taking back everything they thought they could keep from me. My money, my dignity, my name. When I walked in, Claudette was the first to greet me, all fake sweetness. "Sweetheart," she cooed, her voice dripping with that tone she used when she wanted to pacify me. "Let's all just talk this out, okay? There's no need for things to get ugly." I didn't answer. I moved to the dining room, the same one where I'd spent countless holidays serving food and pretending to belong. Gareth was already seated at the head of the table, his arms crossed, jaw tight. He didn't say hello. Sabine leaned back in her chair with that smug tilt of her head, scrolling through her phone as if I weren't even worth her full attention. And Derek? He couldn't meet my eyes. He kept fiddling with his hands, his face pale. I sat down across from them, placing a folder neatly on the table. No one spoke for a moment. The quiet was heavier than any yelling could have been. Gareth finally broke it. "So, you've decided to air our dirty laundry, have you?" His voice rumbled like distant thunder. I met his glare with a calm I didn't know I had. "No," I said evenly. "You did that when you stole from me." Claudette gasped like I'd slapped her. "Stole? Rowena, for heaven's sake, it was a misunderstanding. A few tickets, a little help." "A few tickets?" I cut her off, my tone sharper now. "You used my card without my consent. You funneled money from my accounts for things I didn't agree to. That's not help, Mom. That's theft." Sabine snorted. "You're making us out to be monsters over this. You've always helped. Why start acting brand new now?" I turned to her, "Because I finally understand what you've been doing. I wasn't your sister. I was your bank." For the first time, Sabine's smirk faltered. Without another word, I reached into my folder and pulled out a small device. I set it on the table and pressed play. Marissa's voice filled the room, steady and unflinching. "This is Derek's email from last March, regarding transferring Rowena's funds to cover his debts. It was sent to Claudette and Gareth as well. All of you were aware." The room went still. Derek's head snapped up, his mouth opening like he wanted to object, but no words came out. Claudette's hand flew to her chest, and Gareth's face turned crimson. "Where did you get that?" Gareth growled. "It doesn't matter," I said coolly. "What matters is that I have proof." "Proof of every transfer, every email, every so-called emergency you used as an excuse to drain me." I slid a stack of papers across the table, copies of the fraud report, my bank statements, and the legal notice Jordan had helped me draft. "You will repay every cent in 30 days, or I'll see you in court. And Derek," I turned to him, watching him shrink under my gaze, "my lawyer will be in touch about your gambling fraud." Derek sputtered. "You can't." "I can," I said simply. "And I will." Claudette's voice cracked. "Sweetheart, don't destroy this family over a few dollars. We can work this out privately." I stared at her. "You destroyed this family when you decided my silence was your shield." No one spoke after that. Even Sabine had gone quiet, her sarcasm swallowed by the weight of what I'd just laid bare. For the first time in my life, they didn't have a word to throw back at me. I stood, gathering my folder. "This was the last meal we'll ever share as the people we used to be," I said quietly. No one followed me to the door. Stepping outside, I inhaled the cool night air. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. And 2 months later, Portland looked different to me. Maybe it was the same gray skies, the same drizzle on the pavement, the same sound of passing buses on a busy street, but it felt lighter now. Or maybe I was lighter. I sat at my favorite cafe downtown, by the big window that let me watch the city move without pulling me into its chaos. The same cafe where I used to gulp down burnt coffee before my ICU shifts now felt like a sanctuary. Today I had time to breathe, time to just exist without bracing for the next call, the next guilt trip, the next demand that started with, "You know you're the only one who can help." The teacup in my hand was warm. I liked tea now. It felt like a quiet rebellion against the frantic life I'd been living, a new ritual for a different me. A folder sat on the table, thinner than the one I'd brought to my parents' dining room 2 months ago. That folder had been a weapon. This one? It was proof that I'd survived the war. The bank had confirmed every disputed charge. The fraud department moved faster than I imagined once I gave them the full paper trail. Derek's accounts had been frozen, and last week Marissa texted me, "He's under investigation. It's happening." I reread that text more than once, not because I enjoyed his downfall, but because it was the first time accountability had entered the same room as my family. Even Gareth, the unshakable patriarch, hadn't walked away unscathed. I'd heard through a co-worker of his that he resigned from a company board after HR started poking around the allegations. They didn't want a scandal. Claudette, of course, tried to spin it in the family group chat. "Your father stepped back for his health." But I didn't reply. In fact, I hadn't replied to any of them. My phone buzzed, pulling me back. It was Marissa. She walked in a few minutes later, her hair tucked neatly behind her ears, wearing that quiet confidence of someone who's survived the fire and learned how to live afterward. She slid into the seat across from me, smirking. "You look different," she said. "Better or worse?" I teased, though my voice came out softer than I expected. "Better," she said simply. "Lighter." We ordered muffins, and she gave me updates between bites. Derek was scrambling, she said. Claudette had tried calling her, begging her to keep the family together. Marissa rolled her eyes. "They still don't get it. They think keeping the family intact means keeping the truth buried." I nodded. "They don't get to define us anymore." She gave me a look, half proud, half knowing. "You really believe that now, don't you?" I thought about it. The old me would have said the words just to sound strong. But now? Yeah, I do. When she left, I stayed behind, staring at my journal. It had become my other quiet rebellion. No more frantic lists of bills to pay or shifts to pick up for extra cash. Now it held reflections, gratitude, and plans that didn't center on fixing everyone else's mess. I opened it to a fresh page and pulled an old photo from my purse, the one from Sabine's wedding. I'd found it again after the meeting at my parents' house. There I was, in the farthest corner table, dressed in the same dull dress I wore to every family event, because it was easier than being noticed. I'd paid for half that wedding, and they'd seated me like a stranger. This photo used to sting. Now it reminded me why I'd done everything I did these past months. I pinned it to the journal page with a note scrawled beneath. Never again. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was David, a co-worker from the hospital. We'd been grabbing coffee after shifts, nothing serious, just two people figuring out what it means to start fresh. "Dinner tonight?" His text read. I smiled. Maybe. Before I packed up to leave, I opened my phone one last time and scrolled to the family group chat. The unread messages stacked up like an old wound I hadn't cleaned. Claudette's passive-aggressive guilt trips, Sabine's attempts at justifying theft as borrowing, Gareth's silence. I hovered over the chat, my finger still for a moment, and then I deleted it. No farewell, No final sermon. Just gone. Closure wasn't their apology. It was knowing I didn't need one anymore. I tucked the journal into my bag and walked out of the cafe, feeling the cool Portland air hit my face. They took my money, my trust, and my silence. But I walked away with my name, and that's worth more than anything they ever stole.